Gonna compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
It's a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people that go, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different, and are different species. There's lizard men, there's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live today, it's early. It's 8:30 in the morning on the East Coast. For one of my guests, it's 5:30 in the morning, and for another, it's after lunch. So we've got sort of a nice mix here. Today, I am really excited. We normally talk to, we have conversations about Star Wars. We take deep dives in Star Wars. Today, we're going to expand that because we are privileged to have two guests with us today. First is Howard Berger. He is a makeup special effects artist. He's been involved with over 800 films, TV shows. He's an Oscar winner. He's part of the AMPAS group that is managing special effects. We also have Marshall Julius, who has been on the show a number of times. Marshall is an author himself. He's a movie critic. He's written the book, what is it? I'm so sorry, Marshall. It's early. It's the nerd book, and it's the trivia book, but it's fantastic, and I love it. I'm not going to lie. But hey, let's bring in Marshall and Howard and get things going. See, the best part about that opener is that I can edit the hell out of that, and I will. I will be editing. Howard, Marshall, how are you doing?
Vintage geek, vintage bastard.
I was thinking nerd geek.
Bloody geek. Okay.
That book looks good in every single bathroom, right, Marshall?
Yeah, I was actually thinking of perforating the pages so you could actually write with it.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
Finish the jaw section, flush it. We're good.
Well, hey, Pete, thanks for having us on this morning. Even though it's early here in California, that's okay. And it's well worth getting up and having a talk about things we love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. So as I said, we have Mr. Howard Berger. We have Mr. Marshall Julius. Howard, maybe for the people who may not know you, give us the quick background on who you are. We'll dig into it.
So I co-own a makeup effects company in Los Angeles with Greg Nicotero, and this is our 34th year we've been in the business. It's called K&B EFX Group, and we've done hundreds of movies and TV shows. And just to touch on a little bit, like for the last 11 years, we've created everything for Walking Dead, for all the Walking Dead shows. And Greg Nicotero is the king of the zombies, and he is the guy that has masterminded that entire series for the most part and everything in it. And we've done all Quentin Tarantino's movies, all Robert Rodriguez's movies. I won an Academy Award for Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, of the Wardrobe, and nominated for Hitchcock. tons of films. Sam Raimi, worked with Sam for years and years, and prior to that, in the good old '80s, did all the horror films, Freddy Krueger, and Friday the 13th, and all that stuff. So really, I'm here at my studio. This is my office, and it's a 20,000 square foot facility that holds about 50 people currently, and we make creatures and monsters for movies all day long. So it's really a lot of fun,
If you're any sort of genre fan, which I think most Star Wars fans are, I think Star Wars fans sort of start at Star Wars and then they go, or they come from something, but it's never just Star Wars. And a lot of it is the things, as I was saying to you before we got on, when I was reading through your IMDb and I was preparing to have a conversation with the both of you, like my childhood came out of your studio, which is fantastic, and it's all great work. Marshall, tell people a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I'm no one. I don't even have an Oscar. The only prize I ever won, I've got it on my shelf here.
Yeah.
It was the English prize in secondary school for most improved. This is my Oscar, people. And I just want to thank the Academy and everyone who voted for me.
What was it that you were improved? What did you improve? Like just
like everything. Like I could barely write. I was like a complete dummy. And then I could just about read. And so they gave me like a pity prize.
It seems a little degrading. Like, hey, you're most improved. It's like
I know, but I took it. I went to a very religious Jewish school, right? And the only you could choose your prize, but you could only choose it from this one shop that sold all super religious Jewish stuff. So it was like, I didn't need like dreidels or menorah candles, and I mean, or a new yarmulke, but they had a few books, and they had one on the golem. So basically, it was the only thing about monsters in the whole shop. Have I read it? Let's not get into that. But I do have it. I own it. Apart from that, I've written a few books. I wrote Vintage Geek, the quiz book. I've written about action movies. I'm just basically a jobbing hack, entertainment hack. And fan, just a professional fan and nerd, and that's me.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you improved enough to write multiple books, and I'm glad you improved to write this particular book. This book is called was it Masters?
Get this one right, Pete. Get this one right.
I will get this one right.
It's
Masters of Makeup Effects. See, here's the problem. I left off, when I posted our first tweet about this, I left off the word effects. And so in my head, I'm like trying to make sure I get it right. Yes, Masters of Makeup Effects, A Century of Practical Magic. And it features, well, why don't I let you, Marshall, tell us about the book?
Well, it covers 100 years of movie and film and TV makeup history. Obviously, starting with going back 100 years to what are we with Nosferatu? Just its centenary this year, and we go right up to Dune. So we've got interviews with the makeup artists who did the makeup for Dune and Coming to America. Which, whatever you might think about the sequel, has the most stunning makeups in it, amazing age makeups, just incredible, and everything in between. We go to the Universal monsters, we do horror of the 60s and Hammer, and obviously we have a ton of 80s stuff in there, and we got wonderful stories about every franchise, going from we've got the MCU, we got Harry Potter, we got Star Wars, we got Star Trek, everything that you would want, a little bit of everything. And so that's it. It's everything you could ever want from a book, and so much more.
And it's filled with pictures and stories about those films, and that's what excites me about this book. So first of all, I've been, as I was saying before, I grew up, my father got me into Black Lagoon and The Wolfman and all the Universal and Hammer films. And in fact, I remember when I saw Star Wars with my dad, he was like, wait a minute, that's Peter Cushing, he's from the Hammer films. And then so we made all those connections. But one of the cool things about this book is, whether you're just a fan of the stories, the films themselves, or a makeup fan, you're going to get both pieces there. Howard, how did you get into to movie makeup and effects?
Well, I just grew up loving monsters and movies. And I was lucky enough to grow up here in California, in Los Angeles. And my dad was in the industry, not in the creature industry, but he was a post-production sound editor. And he loved movies. He's a complete cinephile. And so it's just in my blood. And my mom was an artist, so I, maybe got a little bit from her, and she used to draw me like full scale Creature from the Black Lagoon drawings on just butcher paper and hang them up in my room. And I would just be on my bed and look at them all night long because I was so fascinated with it. But, I just got exposed to like the Universal monsters were really the first things out of the gate for me. And my dad explained that there's people that their job is to make the monsters for movies. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then I discovered the Japanese monsters, and Godzilla was massive to me. And, I still love all that stuff. And I just started figuring it out. And there's a really cool makeup store in town called Friends Beauty Supply. And it was a teeny little place. I mean, it was so small when I was a kid, and my parents would go on errands on the weekends, and I'm like, hey, can I go with you? But I had an ulterior motive, and I'm like, hey, can we just swing by? And this is like starting at 8 years old.
Right.
And we'd stop by friends, and like they'd get me like a little jar of latex or clay, and and now Friends Beauty Supply is massive. It's huge. It's like almost a whole city block, and that's where I buy everything for shows. But it just was like for the love of movies, and I got to hunt down. I mean, it all started with like seeing Ray Harryhausen movies too. Like I love Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and Valley of the Gwangi is my all-time favorite, actually. And going to a convention here in LAX at the airport in '75 to see Ray Harryhausen, and he had just had his book From the Land Beyond Beyond come out, and I stood in line for an hour and had him autograph it. And then I saw a sign that says, this makeup guy named Rick Baker was going to talk about this movie, Incredible Melting Man. So I was like, I want to go see that. And that's where I first discovered Rick Baker. And Rick Baker has 7 Academy Awards, did Men in Black and Harry and the Hendersons and Ed Wood. And I mean, American Werewolf in London. Rick's like, I love Rick Baker to no end. I just idolize the guy. And then, from there I learned about Dick Smith and Stan Winston and Rob Bottin. And I really made it a point to like have some sort of contact with them and correspondence, because Rick was on the East Coast in New York, and Stan was actually up the street from where I live. So I found out, and I walked 2 miles with a box of just crap and knocked on his door, and he opened it, and I got to go in and meet Stan and all the guys. And I was 12 at that time.
Wow.
So I really tried to take initiative and like, if I'm going to make this happen, it's going to happen. But it's and then, leading into Star Wars, then my dad took me to the Grauman's Chinese Theater opening weekend.
Oh, wow.
And I had already my mom bought me the soundtrack.
Right.
I still have the original one, and it's magnet. And I would listen to it and imagine what I was going to see, because I heard so much about it. This is before it came. It came out like a month before the movie came out.
Right.
I was like wearing that record out. And then he took me to see it, and it was the most spectacular film I've ever seen. And I went, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to work on movies like Star Wars. But just tracking back to the book. So like, as Marshall was saying, Marshall and I have been friends for 15 years, and we met in London. I was doing a press junket for Chronicles of Narnia, and that's where we met. And Marshall is, for the last 15 years, been bugging the crap out of me about doing something together. And I've just been
actually stalking him.
Yeah.
Really.
I was like, I don't have.
Most people would have blocked me. In fact, everybody else has blocked me. Not Howard.
But I didn't have the time. So when the pandemic hit, Marshall said, okay, you have no excuse. And I went, you're right. So we came up with a concept, and we talked every single day. And Marshall, by the way, is the greatest partner I've had. I mean, he is great because the guy is always on top of it. He's as proactive as I am. He's maybe a little more than me, which is amazing. And just really so great and so smart and really picks up picked up the whole thing. So we decided we're going to write a book. And I said, well, I don't want to write a book about myself or about K&B. I love stories. So when I'm on set, I love to hear stories from all the different crew people, be it makeup, be it stunt guys, be it, I worked on a movie called City Slicker, and Jack Lilly was the animal wrangler and stuntman, and Jack worked on Stagecoach with John Wayne, and I would sit and listen to their stories, and they were amazing. I just absorb all these stories. So I said, I want to write a book about the adventures of working in the film industry and doing makeup effects, and include as many makeup effects idols of mine, but also my peers and people that have inspired me, that continue to inspire me, that are my friends, and I want to hear their stories. And then we decided to reach out to directors, actors, editors. So it's really a big, it really grew. We have almost 70 interviews in this book from all over the world. It's international. It just was such a fun project to do. I mean, it took 2 years. We started April 2020, and literally 2 weeks ago, we were like, we're done.
That was it. That was just finally, I couldn't believe it. It was like, I just didn't think we would ever kind of finish it, but we had to at some point. And
you have photos that have never been seen before from all kinds of films in there, right?
We reached out everybody. I really played upon the kindness of all my friends, who, what was amazing is anytime I sent out an email and said, hey, I'm writing this book, would you be interested? And immediately was absolutely 100%, in bold caps. And I was really, really happy about that and very appreciative to all the contributors. And then when I hit everybody up for photos, Marshall and I ended up collecting 4,000 photos.
Oof.
And we used about 1,000.
Wow.
So there's like 3 or 4 more volumes of this book we can write, and so much literature. I mean, Marshall has unbelievable. We for the most part, we interviewed everybody for about 2 hours, with the exception of
we got like 150 hours worth of interview
with the exception of John Landis, which was about 4 hours.
Wow.
Half of that was Landis, and the rest was everyone else.
Yeah. But it was great, John. Everybody was so great. But I mean, we were so lucky to that, and also we hit everybody nobody was doing anything, because again, we used the pandemic to our advantage. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm on a set. It's like it wasn't an issue. And even when it came time to write the foreword, we talked about it, and I reached out to Guillermo del Toro to write the foreword, and immediately it's like, absolutely, I want to be a part of this book. Wow. And then I just finished working with Seth MacFarlane on the Orville, and said, Seth, would you write the afterword? And he's like, 100% I will. So I mean, it just all came together perfectly.
That's amazing. And again, I think that's one of the great things about this book is that it's storytelling. It's not just photos and captions and let you figure it out. Marshall, as a fan who grew up as a geek, I mean, you have it in your Twitter feed, and you live it, and you and I have spoken about it. How is it for you to have these conversations with the people who created the things that you loved growing up? I can't imagine.
I'll tell you, Pete, it was absolutely amazing, heavenly. I absolutely loved it. I mean, Howard, as when you're a journalist, you've really got to sort of fight for most interviews. You've got to pester the hell out of someone. I mean, I pestered Howard for 15 years to do this book, and I mean, we were friends. And but when you're trying to get an interview with somebody who you don't know, who's not pitching something, it's easier when somebody's got a movie to sell or a book, getting an interview from them. But when they're just working on something else, or they haven't got anything to promote, as a journalist, it's really hard to get any sort of access. And Howard it was different. If I tried to write this book by myself, I would have probably gotten like 10 interviews and it would have taken as long to get them. Howard just sent out an email, and it's like, and then Rick Baker's saying yes, and Tom Savini's saying yes, and it's like holy shit, this is like absolutely sensational. And then we're having these amazing sort of friendly chats where and Howard and these people are all just catching up. They've all known each other forever, and you're just privy to just a much more sort of intimate level of chat. And everybody was very relaxed. I mean, we didn't like trick anyone into giving any stories that maybe they would embarrass them. I mean, lots of stuff was said off the record, and that's fine. It remained off the record.
Sure.
When we finished and transcribed all the interviews, and we chose the quotes and the stories that we wanted to use in the book, we sent everything to everybody, and we gave them the chance to make any corrections, or say, actually, I was loaded that day and I probably shouldn't have said that, or so it's like, so everybody's like super happy with what they said. And actually there were a few stories that remained in the book that I was amazed that they were happy with. We got an amazing story by James McAvoy in which he sounds like a crazy person talking about The Exorcist, and it's amazing. And we sent it to him and said, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah, send it." That was like, it was so much fun. I mean, look, Howard knows these people his whole life. He's friends with them. But even Howard gets a bit starstruck around Rick Baker, and so I was kind of like that with everybody. You kind of maintain a certain professionalism, but that usually goes out the window, especially when do you remember like the first 5 minutes of every interview, people would say, "Marshall, what's that behind you?" And Howard would go, "Okay, Marshall, give the tour." And I kind of unplug the computer and go around and show everyone the ceiling, which, is obviously one of the more disturbing of this room. It was amazing, and to be able to ask all these incredible people questions that I've wanted to know the answers to for years, to be able to talk to John Landis and Rick Baker about American Werewolf in London, to talk to Tom Savini about Dawn of the Dead, which is my all-time favorite horror movie, and it was an unbelievable privilege and so much fun. I loved it. And what we hope is that we imparted that sort of fun into the book, and we only included the cream of the stories. There's no sort of exposition. It's all stories. The whole thing is stories. We just cut all the fat out so that we could pack in as many stories as possible. And I think what our intention was is what has actually ended up on the page, and it's kind of it took 2 years, but hopefully that you can see that.
And the layout is great too. I mean, we worked with Wellback Publishing in the UK, and they really did a great job, and Russell and Ross, and it was great. It was great, and it's got a visual splash. We wanted to make sure it just wasn't boring. That it wasn't boring looking, it wasn't a boring read. The photos weren't the same stuff you've seen 100 times, So that's why we dug really deep. And so when it came time after all the interviews were done, we split up the chore. So Marshall handled all the interviews, transcribing and then figuring out the quotes, and then I handled all the photos, which was, and both of us had our full plates. I mean, that was a lot of work for both of us, and picking out of 4,000 photos and out of millions of words, scaled it down, and then started to put it all together. And since both Marshall and I are very visual people, we were able to put together and show the publisher, this is what we're thinking. This is what we want for the cover. This is what we want for the inside. This is the colors we want. So it's a very intriguing book. The other thing too, I really made a point, and Marshall and I were talking about it, and when we got a publisher, I'm starting to realize, as I'm talking to all my friends, that we all have some form of learning disabilities. I'm severely dyslexic, and I realized a lot of my friends are dyslexic. So one of the things was, it needs to be a book built for people that have learning disabilities and might have reading disabilities. And I wanted the print to be a certain size so that you could read it. I wanted it to be intriguing. I didn't want it to be overwhelming, so that somebody that has a reading disability would look at it and go, I just can't read this. So that's what I do. I'm like, it's just simply too many words. So so we were able to design it that way, and it's very simplistic, but it's really pleasing to your eye, aesthetically pleasing, and it's amazing. I learned a lot. Again, I've known most of these people for 40 years, and I learned so much about them that I never ever knew. And I know that Marshall and I are talking about names that are identifiable, like John Landis and Rick Baker, and so forth and so on, all these big names, Seth MacFarlane and Guillermo. But we also interviewed the guys I've worked with that inspire me, that a lot of people don't know. There's people like Steve Prouty, who's amazing, and Tony G, who's amazing, and Tammy Lane and Mike Marino, and all these people that I gather so much inspiration from and admire so much. Lois Burwell, and tons of people that when they read this book, that if you're a makeup effects fanatic or a movie fanatic, you'll go, oh yeah, I know who these people are. But if you're not, and you're just interested in it, you're going to learn about all these people that aren't in the the main circle that we all know through publications and so forth. So it really, I feel like we threw a very broad net across the film industry. Even like I had said, editors, we talked to Fred Raskin, who started off as Sally Menken's assistant with Quentin Tarantino. And when Sally passed away, Fred took over, and his first big editing was Django, you know, and Fred now cuts all James Gunn's movies and you know, cut Peacemaker the whole season, and, and on Guardians. He did Guardians 2. He's on Guardians 3 now, and Fred's just a great guy, and he's a massive fan of everything.
Oh yeah. You know, I having interviewed people from lots of different disciplines over the years, I find that when you interview, not all actors, a lot of actors, maybe because they're so practiced at doing interviews, and because there's so much, you know, they're so well known by the public, that that they're sort of polished and a little bit distant, maybe a little bit guarded. I found that when for the most part, when we're talking to all the makeup guys, is that they're just absolutely just dorks like us. I mean, they were all just big nerds, and they're all excited about monsters and makeup, and they're not just their films, everybody else's films. Everybody's into everybody else's stuff, and everybody's just excited about it all the time. Doesn't matter how many years, how many decades they've been doing it. So you just immediately plug into that. And I think that's why Howard and I sort of like clicked, you know, in the first place, because, you know, Howard didn't, you know, judge me for not being you know, an Oscar-winning filmmaker. He just saw.
But you did win Most Improved, Marshall, and that's
I really did win Most Improved. That has been in grammar school. That is true. Well, maybe Howard knew that, and I just didn't know that he knew that. We'll have to discuss that.
Well,
but everybody was just very sort of. Everybody had that in common, and you know, Pete, when you got something in common with someone. You know, you hit it off. Like, you know, nerds are my religion. My mum always used to say, Marshall, wherever you go in the world, if you see someone wearing a Star of David, then, you know, you'll feel a kinship with them and stuff. And it was like, okay, not really, but if I see them wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, hell yes.
That's right.
That's what
you are my friend now, and you know, I've just met you, but we are friends.
So what is it? I mean, you guys are, as you're talking, I'm thinking about something from other people who have worked on effects I've spoken to, whether it's you know, the makeup effects or the digital effects. There's something about their stories that are all there's a similar through line, Howard, and that is they tend to have been inspired as a child. They saw something, then they can probably almost remember the moment, the movie, the scene sometimes that got them. But all of them like were borderline stalkers on getting to what they wanted, driven to do that. Howard, what was your like you went to the Harryhausen event, but did you followed up? I heard you ended up with Rick Baker's phone number somehow. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it like this. We're all kind of like, use Close Encounters as the point of reference. Like there's an image in your head, and you have to, you know, you have to figure out what the hell this is. And then you all converge usually in some way, you know, be it Comic-Con, be it whatever. Right. But, you know, it's just a sidetrack. So I took my wife, who's Norwegian, to Comic-Con one year. And she had the best time ever. She doesn't like crowds. She's an introvert. She's an artist. And she loved it because she felt everyone there was there for one reason. And everyone there was so kind. And they all were there for the love of what Comic-Con is about. Yep. And I thought that was really special. I think they're some of the nicest people in the world, you know. But, you know, I mean, I feel like, you know, yeah, I was obsessed. And so with Rick Baker, the story with Rick Baker is that this is back before the internet. Right. And we had the white pages and the yellow pages. So I wanted to meet Rick Baker. So I looked through the yellow pages, and there was no Rick Baker in North Hollywood, because I knew he lived in North Hollywood. And so then I went to see this movie, Incredible Shrinking Woman, which, starred Lily Tomlin, but also Rick Baker built this magnificent gorilla suit, which is my favorite gorilla suit, Sydney, and he also played the character, and he did such a great job. But I noticed that his credit is Richard A. Baker, and I'm like, aha! So I got the yellow pages and looked through it, and I found Richard A. Baker, you know, Hortense Avenue, North Hollywood, and I called, and I was so nervous, my heart was pounding out of my chest, and a woman's voice came on, and it was at that point his then wife, Elaine, answered. And I'm like, is this Rick Baker's house? And she's like, it is. And I'm like, oh my God, my name's Howard Berger. I'm the biggest fan in the world, and I love Rick Baker. And, you know, so she's like, well, call back later. And, so call back later to me meant call every day. Baker on the phone. So I called, I kid you not, every day for 6 months until she finally said, okay, you're really persistent. So I'm going to give you Rick's shop number. And so call him. He knows you're calling. And I was like, oh my God. So my heart again, like exploding. I couldn't breathe. I call, I'm like, and I hear, hi, this is Rick Baker. And I couldn't get any words out. I hyperventilate. And he's like, listen, calm down. I'm just a normal person. Just take a breath. And I'm like, my name's Howard Berger. I love you. And you're the greatest. And I like, literally my chest is seizing up. And he then invites me to the shop the next day. And I was in high school. I was like in 9th grade, I think. And so I had to go ask my mom. Like I hung up the phone and I went over, I ran into the dining room and my family was having dinner. And I'm like, Mom, I just talked to Rick Baker. Can I not go to school tomorrow? And can you drop me off in North Hollywood at this shop? And my mom's like, 100%, you're fine. Meanwhile, my mom just dropped me off on the corner of Whitsett and Sherman Way and then left. And I spent the day at Rick Baker's, which was magnificent. But the I guess back then, the faith my mother had in me and whoever I was visiting, who she never met, and just dropped me off at a warehouse.
Safety wasn't invented yet, Howard. It was okay.
This now, after 40 years or whatever, even longer, almost 50 years, and going, what the hell? But I spent the day at Rick Baker's, and I met Steve Johnson and Kevin Brannon and Elaine Baker and Tom Hester and Doug Beswick, and they were working on Videodrome. Prepping Videodrome at the time. So I got to see all this stuff. And then, a little, like a year later, I had my bar mitzvah, which was, we can get into that later when we start talking about Star Wars stuff, because it was pretty squibbly. But my parents said, well, you can have a big party or we can go on a trip. And I'm like, I want to go on a trip. And I knew Rick Baker was going to London to go do Legend of Greystoke. And I said, I want to go to London. So I called Rick and I said, I'm going to be in London with my folks. Can I come visit? So he's like, absolutely, just give me a call. So the whole 2 weeks was planned around my one day visiting Rick Baker. And that was up front. So we went to London. I called Rick. He's like, yeah, come spend the day with us. We're at Shepperton Studio. Or no, we were Borum Studios. So we had to hop a train, take the train all day long. And then I went to the studio. I'm this little kid. I'm 13 years old. Wow. And spent the day with Rick Baker. And it was the most magnificent thing. And then I had the rest of the holiday but I was like, I want to get home. I'm so inspired. I want to get home and sculpt and make monsters, but I'm stuck here.
In horrible London.
Shush up. If I knew you, I would have come over.
I know.
But it was great. I mean, my parents were so wonderful, and they're like, we're going to go to London. And we know it's all based around one day with Rick Baker. Yeah. But yeah, it was just so great and so inspiring. And like when I was a kid, I would write Dick Smith, and Dick Smith would always write me back. And I have a big book that's now at my house called Howard's Book of Knowledge. And it's a scrapbook filled with all the notes Rick Baker Dick Smith sent me. Like I go, like, what do you think of this? And he would just go, oh, here's my blood formula, which I still use and is in the book.
Is in the book.
Yeah. It's in the book, by the way. And but it just has everything in there. Chris Walas's mechanisms for the gremlins, for the mugwais and the spitting mechanism and stuff from Rob Bottin. And it's stuff that I keep always because I cherish it, but I also will reference it at times. But yeah, so that's my Rick Baker story. I stalked a lot of people, and I even I had the impetus of this book was when I was a kid in the 80s. There's a book called Making a Monster.
Yep.
And it's got Dr. Zayas on the cover, and it's a great book. And I bought it, and that became my Bible, and I carried it everywhere. I bought 2 copies. So I kept a copy that was like safe, that nothing would happen to. And then I have my master copy that's all covered in clay, smudges, because I used it for reference, but it also is filled with autographs, and it's before the world of selfies. And so I was like, I'm going to go hunt these guys down, and they're going to sign my book. So my book is pretty well signed by, Tom Berman and John Chambers and so forth and so on, and Danny Strepek. And so that was like it. I'm like, Marshall, I want to write a sequel to that book, but make it our own. And that really was the leaping off point, was that book for me.
Yeah. To try and create a book that Howard loved as much as that. We hope that other people would love as much as Howard loved that book. But the difference between the two books is that Making a Monster was more instructional, wasn't it? It actually had some stuff.
It's
to some extent,
and it's also more autobiographical. Like talks about Mike Westmore and this is how Mike started. Da 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 da. That's not this book, and this book is not instructional on any level. It's not a tutorial. There's nothing about how we do stuff. It's all about hilarious stories because. When we're on set, you're on set for 12 to 18 hours every day, and we all sit around like a bunch of hens and laugh and talk about stories, and some are just like really, really, colorful stories, and you're just sitting there laughing your ass off about it. And I'm like, I want to include all those, and I also feel like that's what keeps a person alive, after they're gone, is the stories. You keep telling the stories, and we've learned that through time. Look at all the stories that are told through history, and to me, it's like I want people to know these great stories, and I want to read them. And it was nice when I had just seen Guillermo at the Academy luncheon, and I was sitting talking to him. He's like, I wish I had this book when I was a kid. This book I wish I had. This is a great book. So it was really wonderful to hear that, and it is. I think I wish I had this book too. I would be reading it cover to cover all day long.
Well, I can't wait to get it. I'll throw in a little plug. It's available for pre-order now. The link will be in the podcast notes. I will be tweeting it, and I can't wait for it. And it's funny, you bring up as you tell these stories, and as I talk to others, like I said, who this was their story. I was going to meet whoever, right? I'm going to be there. Maybe talk a little bit about today's movie making process, because there's no way little Johnny Smith, who loves Marvel effects, could show up in and spend a day on the set with James Gunn shooting Guardians 3, or even with the effects people who are in the back, or is there still that sort of is there a little bit of an opening for the right kid or the right person at the right time?
That's a good question, actually. It's certainly things were. Well, we didn't have the internet. Right. The internet has changed things, obviously, for the better and for the worse. So everything is so protected and so secret, and you can't have visitors anymore.
Right.
We used to always have visitors on set before there was social media, because people just don't respect. They don't respect the rules. Yeah. And even with my crews, that's one of the first things I have to talk. I'm like, no photographs, no posting, no nothing, and when the movie comes out or the show comes out, do not post anything. Please contact us to make sure you're not compromising an actor or the integrity of the show or storyline. Because to me, I feel like sometimes posting for people is like heroin. Like they have to do it, like they go crazy and like, I haven't posted in an hour. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. All right. And
that's Pete you're talking about.
Yeah, that is me. Yeah,
that's okay.
I'm tweeting as we're talking right now.
That's fine. But yeah, I think because there's such a level of, you just can't trust people, and unfortunately, people have proven time and time again that they just the drug of posting and social media is stronger than your word. It's like, oh, I'm not going to post this, and then you see it posted, and you're like. It just ruins it for everybody.
There's a bit of it's a crazy integrity loss. Like even just recently, there was a video game and there was an embargo, and I saw people posting ahead of the embargo, and for what? So they could get the first 500 views on their YouTube page or whatever. But yeah, I think it is interesting because like I said, the stories that you tell, and of people just being able to just hang out, because like you said, look, it doesn't matter what the technology is, you're still sitting on set for 18 hours, right? So why not be able to have that opportunity to kind of share that kind of thing? So
absolutely. Yeah, no, it's great, and that's when I'm most happy. And I love doing all different size shows, and sometimes I'll have a crew of 2 people, but then sometimes I'll have a crew of 50 on set. And I love it because I hire all my friends and I just enjoy every moment. And when we're doing location, I did a film called Oz the Great and Powerful that Sam Raimi directed. And it was so much fun to work on. We were all in Detroit for 7 months. There was, 40 of us, and we just were just a big, fun, happy family. And, you know, and I love orchestrating. I'm very much the guy that's like, come on, we're all going to go to the dinner and then we're going to go see a movie. And, you know, it was just so much fun. And I got to be with all my friends, and such a great experience, you know? But yeah, no, it's what it's about. You know, I'm such a fan of everything, and I appreciate that I get to wake up every morning and go to work and do what I love. You know, I say, especially nowadays, I still love what I do. I just, unfortunately, I don't always love the people I'm doing it for.
Yeah.
Things have changed in the film industry. And it's harder, you know, especially with all the COVID protocols, make it much more difficult to do your job and all that good stuff. But it's still, you know, Marshall and I are still massive fans. Marshall and I talk every single day, which is unusual. I don't have a friend that I talk to every single day, except maybe Tammy Lane, who I adore to no end, who's my cohort in for the last 27 years on set and everything. She is magnificent. And but there's really, you know, I don't even think I talk to my wife as much as I talk to Marshall.
we always have so much to talk about, though. And so when I see a film, or I know Howard's seen a film, I just want to know what he thought. And then,
and same here.
It's always we've never actually run out of things to talk about.
Well, I think Marshall and I are very, very similar because we are big, dopey geeks. We're both Jewish, which is nice. We both have wives who are wonderful and beautiful and tolerant. And they both you know, have to deal with our idiocy. I mean, the fact was, like, I'm looking at Pete. I'm looking behind you. Like, I just bought for my birthday was in December, so I bought myself a new Darth Vader and a original Stormtrooper helmet. And so I hid it from my wife because I didn't want her to really know at first until I was wearing it. So she was in the bathroom and I put the Darth Vader, and it has this little sound chip, you know?
Yeah.
And I walked in and she's like, where the hell did you get that? I'm like, this is my birthday present. And I have a Stormtrooper as well. You know, and I could wear it all day long. I have a full Darth Vader costume that I built years ago. And the helmet's a pull out of the Empire Strikes Back. Bolts.
Howard doesn't need a voice chip, by the way. And Howard, at the tip of a hat, will do a Darth Vader impression.
Yeah, I'll do it in a little bit.
You seriously don't need a voice
chip.
I
woke my wife up yesterday morning as Darth Vader, so you got to do the breathing and all that stuff. But it's great, you know. I mean, that's a great character. Star Wars, you know, Darth Vader is my all-time favorite villain, and I think out of everything in Star Wars, you know, all the characters, that is. I mean, granted, I love Chewie and all that, but Darth Vader, there was just something about Darth Vader that really hit a nerve with me. And I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, Star Wars. Now we're talking back to Star Wars.
Yeah,
I'd never seen anything like. People had seen Star Wars before me, and we're talking about it, and they're like, "Yeah, the ships go over your head." And up until that point, my only reference was, like, you know, 2001. Which is magnificent, Doug Trumbull's beautiful work.
Sure.
But it wasn't dynamic. It was, you know, I mean, in that sense, it was spectacular to watch on the Cinerama Dome. But I couldn't imagine I just couldn't understand it. And when that blockade runner and then the cruiser goes over, I'm like, I can't even believe I don't even know what I'm watching here. You know, it's the most fantastic thing, you know, I've ever seen. And it just kept going and going and going. So Star Wars stole my imagination, and I've just found my sketchbook from 1977, and it is Star Wars drawing. And I remember we went away for the summer to the beach. My mom rented a house, and we stayed there. And I never went to the beach. I sat in my room for the entire summer and drew Star Wars drawing. And it's a little book, and every page, hundreds of pages, Star Wars characters. That's all I did the entire summer.
What is it? So, there is no clear answer to this, but it's a conversation I've been having a lot lately on the show. And what is it about? So, yeah, you can love Creature from Black Lagoon, you can love 2001, but there's something about Star Wars that, look, there's three of us here with three very different things that we do, right? But there's this geek connection, but there's this Star Wars thing that just lives rent free in our brains, no matter what we do. I'd love to hear from both of you. What are your thoughts on what it is about this? Because it goes beyond just A New Hope, right? Because now it's 45 years later and we're still getting content. My 9-year-old son is like counting down the days to Star Wars Celebration in a couple months, or 55 days from recording this, and I'm not counting down the days.
Right,
So I don't. It's coming sometime. But what is it about Star Wars that just it's attached to the three of us and millions of other people?
Marshall, what do you think?
For me, well, my dad passed away not long before Star Wars came out. So I guess I was kind of a sad little kid, and Star Wars was a great distraction. But I'd always gone to see movies from when I was very small. My mum was a big movie fan, and so I grew up going to every monster movie, every sci-fi movie, anything with fantasy, and everything else. You know, every good comedy, every adventure, just everything. But the monster movies, Doug McClure monster movies, Warlords of Atlantis, and all that. Rubbery monster stuff. I just lapped it up, and anytime it was on, anything like that was on TV, or the Universal Monsters and King Kong especially, I just kind of just loved it. Anything with that sort of imagination that you could just escape and just be somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and Forbidden Planet, which was a huge favorite, was probably my favorite movie before Star Wars came out, and it remains, it's in my top 5.
Sure.
But I know Star Wars, in England, it's Howard was talking about how he had the soundtrack for a month.
Right.
Okay. Star Wars came out in May in 77 in America. It came out in December. In England. Okay. So we had news reports saying, everybody's going crazy. We saw the pictures of the Grauman's Chinese with the queues going around the block. And it was like, and I had the novelization.
Right.
With all those great color pages in the middle. And that was the thing that I had. I didn't have the soundtrack first. I had the novelization. And I'd pretty much committed it to memory before I ever saw Star Wars, before I even saw a trailer. Because the only place you'd see trailers would be, at the cinema.
Right.
And, I did used to go to the movies a lot. But, for a long time, the only images that I had of Star Wars were from the book. And there was... just some of the most iconic images, and by the time I actually saw Star Wars, it was already a legend in my head. It was already, and then like Howard said, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. So I'm expecting the absolute greatest thing ever, but it's like to the nth degree. It's like 10 times the greatest thing ever, and. I think these days there's so much stuff. Everybody's just saturated with, and it's great. It's great that there's, movies and TV shows and 24/7 on a million different channels. Everybody's just sport for choice. But with Star Wars, it was like, I just waited the shit out of that movie. I just really wanted to see it. I just couldn't wait to see it. And then it just blew me away because it was so much better than anything I'd ever seen before. Yeah. And then it seemed like everything after that was just trying to copy Star Wars.
Yeah.
So it was like, and you knew that.
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, okay, that's good, but it's it's no Star Wars, and it just there's something about the specialness of it, and I think that the reason that is because we just love it. It's like we just kind of love it, like it's like we love our mums,
Yeah.
It's just, it is not just a movie. It's not just because you like the design of it or the characters, or there's just some sort of magic kind of wrapped up in that movie, isn't it? It is crazy when you talk about it, because there are a lot of films that I'm a fan of,
right?
But when you actually talk about actual love, then the Star Wars has got to be that movie, hasn't it? Because it just changed my life when I saw that. It was like I just want to be around that all the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
No, it's true. I mean, when I think about Star Wars, I have a feeling in my chest that I had when I saw the movie, and everything related to the movie, like be it the Joe Johnston sketchbook, that I bought, which I got Joe to sign when he was doing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I had a friend that was his assistant. I'm like,
that blue cover, the soft. I I have one in my basement that I beat the hell. And speaking
yeah.
of sketches, I was copying his style in the book, so I've ruined that book. But it means more to me than
I
most
agree.
of my. Yeah.
Well,
And they only got one printing each, those books.
Wow.
I interviewed him for October Sky, and I got him to autograph all 3 of them for.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
It was like, look, we'll talk about the film later, and he did different autographs in every single one. It was
fantastic.
No, it's cool, and I mean, and the Ralph McQuarrie portfolio, which I have that right over there, and I mean everything. I just started to collect Star Wars stuff out the Yin Yang, and buy the Don Post Darth Vader and Don Post Chewbacca, and I mean it was crazy. And the T-shirts, and I still have my iron-on, because remember they came out with a book of the iron-ons.
Yep.
I have one that is cherry. I never did anything, and it's like I'm still thinking like, I think I'm just going to scan them and then figure that out. I don't want to take the book apart. It's from 1977, and it's perfect.
Is that the one with? Let me see if it's the one that I had. It has R2 and 3PO on the cover, right?
Yeah. And it says that, and it has like R2, 3PO, and it's like really 70s.
It's so 70s,
but it's so cool.
You know what the remarkable thing was? I'm listening to this conversation. Is that any of us ever had sex in our lives? You know what I mean? It's like that we actually managed to get married, and it's like, how did we manage to?
But it's
do
still,
that? I mean, we certainly didn't have these conversations with girls that you're trying to, impress.
No, that's true. I mean, listen, I remember when Empire Strikes Back opened, I went opening day. I ditched school. I got busted big time because I didn't go to school, but I took my then girlfriend, and we stood in line in Westwood at the Avco Cinema for 10 hours.
Oh my gosh!
Waited. And finally got to see it, and it was packed. It was, I mean, just day one. I took the bus because I didn't have a car, and took the bus and got off and waited in line for 10 hours. And then, of course, I was, the end of the movie is you're like, what the hell, with Darth Vader revealing, the secret. And I was so happy that nobody drove by like a jerk in the car, like Darth Vader is Luke's father. But it was such a surprise, and I just remember hearing the air get sucked out of the theater. The gasp that 2,000 people or 200 people, or no, it was probably 1,000-seat theater, so 1,000 people just like. But those feelings still stick with me, and I love all the Star Wars stuff now. I think it's pretty cool, but it doesn't have the feel that those first 2 movies had. Like, I wasn't really a Jedi fan. I like Jedi more now. And I think after seeing the Lucas, the Phantom Menace and so forth and so on, obviously I like Jedi more. But I think like Mandalorian's cool. I thought season 2 of Mandalorian was amazing. Like, it blew me away. And I'm just, it all looks so cool, but it's so great, but nothing will ever be as great as that original series because it was brand new. The original series of New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Jedi, because it was so new. You'd never seen these people before. You've never lived in those worlds, and everything just seems so innovative, and there was a craft store called Kit Craft that was open for 76 years here in Studio City, and it recently closed during the pandemic, or not after we're in the pandemic still, but recently closed, and it was very sad. And we, as movie makers and monster makers and model makers, we bought everything there. That's where we bought everything. And the guys that started Sideshow Toys, they were clerks there.
Oh wow!
Tom Gillian sold models, and people would be able to sell their garage kits there, and so I went anyhow, as for 40 years, I was looking at the Star Wars models up on the wall, and they're beautifully put together and painted. And I would always say, like, are those for sale? They're like, no. When the store was closing, I went in and I'm like, are those for sale? And they went, yes. And I said, I'll take all of them.
Wow.
And I bought all of them. They're sitting on my desk over there. And I bought all the models, Star Wars models, that I've been looking at for 40 years because I don't want them going to the trash, or not that they would, but my eyes had laid upon them forever and ever and ever, and I always dreamed of having those. They're so awesome and so cool the way they're put together. They're the original ones, and it's just those. I'm looking at the Millennium Falcon right now, which I think is one of the greatest designs of us ever. I mean, what a crazy ass design! I mean,
It shouldn't work. I mean, that was the thing about. I mean, I think I read it somewhere, and I wish I could remember where I read it because I quote it all the time, and I'm sure I'm screwing up the quote horribly. But Ralph McQuarrie looked at his paintings that he gave to George and said, "There's no way this is going to look good on screen." And honestly, none of it should have worked. That original Vader design, the Stormtroopers, the Millennium Falcon, none of that should have worked. But it all worked. Every single piece of it.
It's like everything in that movie is iconic. Everything in that movie is iconic. So. You know, and it's great to see that, you know, I think with, you know, the J.J. Abrams Star Wars films, which I like, you know, the first one, but Force Awakens. But I think that then just makes this new generation, they watch that and then they go back to see the originals, you know, the first three or what have you. And it's great. It's always going to be going. And now, you know, you have Disney Plus. You can watch Star Wars 24/7. I'm like, this is great. I got rid of like all my DVDs. I'm like, why do I need DVDs anymore? I have Disney Plus. I can watch everything I want to watch. But yeah, there's just something about it that it hit the right time.
Yeah,
that was a film that needed to be made and shown to everyone, and it changed. I mean, it changed millions and millions and millions of lives. It truly did. I mean, there's generations that went, I want to work in the film business. Yeah. I want to write fantasy. I want to write sci-fi. It helped rediscover. It's like Greg Nicotero loves Star Wars too, but he loves Star Trek. So there's, you know, and I feel those are two very different worlds and two very different fans. You know, it's like, I'm a Star Wars fanatic, and then like Greg's a Trekkie for sure. But it's always very interesting to see the, you know, how it all plays out. And
I'm a double agent.
I love Star Trek too, but nothing holds a candle to Star Wars. So,
but it's
there's something about that, because I mean, the thing with Star Trek is that actually it's more consistent.
Yeah,
and you've got hundreds and hundreds of hours, and you know, most of those hours are pretty damn great. And with Star Wars, it will kick you in the nuts sometimes.
But what's amazing,
coming back for more. Especially with those original trilogy, it doesn't matter that it's not hundreds of hours. It's 7 hours altogether of just. It's just sort of like pure happiness, I think, in the movie form. Really.
And there's something about the story, though, like, because I've told this before, and I think it's really, to me, it's striking, because now I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. And of course, we all had the "I am your father" moment. That was the shocker, and we just like stunned. Before Rise of Skywalker came out, my daughter and I watched all the movies from 1 to 8 over several weeks, because, you know, who can put a kid through all of that? But she didn't realize that Palpatine was the Emperor. Like, she didn't make that connection until that moment in Revenge of the Sith, when she was like, I knew there was something not right. And my son, who watched, like, the difference between the way we consume Star Wars, because we've sort of had a linear track. My son now has like a toy box of 45 years of Star Wars, right? Anything he pulls this, he watches that. So to him, the connection to Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith was kind of just part of this tapestry. But his favorite characters were the clone troopers, the Rex and Fives and Cody from the animated show. And when they turned in the animated series, that I literally watched his jaw drop. Like, that broke his heart like that. But it's amazing that the story, the tapestry of the legend and the myth that is Star Wars is working in different places, and that's probably why it's still surviving the way it is, right? My son can still really get into it, even though he didn't have that shock that we all had, which none of us will ever forget that moment when we heard Vader tell Luke that. It's pretty wild that story can continue to have that impact after all these years. And I mean, you could argue that the reveal of Baby Yoda in the first episode of The Mandalorian is the biggest cultural impact since maybe the first Star Wars. And I know that's a big statement to say, but Baby Yoda's everywhere. You can't go to
Baby Yoda's that was a pretty big moment in Star Wars. For me, in Empire, though, as shocking as it was when Darth Vader said, you know, I'm your father, for me, the real shocker of that film was when Luke just has his hand fixed up. They're looking out the window, and then the music swells and the credits start playing. And it's like, what are you doing? And so does it Carbonite.
We're not
what
done.
Are you doing? I remember I was sitting there waiting for the credits to end, thinking, it's got to come back. It's got to, the film's, how can it possibly be over? What the hell are you doing? And then it's like, okay, Marshall, this is a cliffhanger, and you just have to come back in 3 years.
3 years.
To see what's happened. And for me, I mean, that was the balls on a film to do that. Jesus. Really, seriously.
We complain having to wait
say,
8 months on Disney Plus.
These days, everybody makes movies for there to be sequels and trilogies, and every Marvel movie is just an entry point to the next 10 Marvel movies. And so we're sort of used to being screwed over by films and being told, well, this is a taster, but it's going to be over 3 films, or okay, so you watched 7 Harry Potter films, but this last part is actually only part 1 of the last part. And it's like, oh my God. But it's like when Empire came out, it was like, no, never seen anything like it. It's like, I'm used to watching TV where the occasional 2-parter, you'd have to wait till the next week. But come back in 3 years? That was the shocker for me. That was the shocker. Sorry, I just tapped right back into that. And it's like, I was impressed and full of rage at the same time.
So, Howard, you said that you had a Star Wars bar mitzvah. I got to ask you about that before I let you guys go.
Yeah, well, I had a bar mitzvah, and this was in 1977, and my parents said, well, we could do a theme, and I'm like, Star Wars theme, 100%. So and at that point, this is before all the, you couldn't go out and buy all the cool stuff. So my Star Wars theme was that there was a Star Wars, like those big Star Wars comic books that came out, and I still have mine.
Yeah.
That were on each table, and there was like some sort of little Star Wars things and maybe some figures. And then the thrill for me was my friend Gene Omens, who was probably 5 foot tall, had made a Darth Vader costume, and he came to the party, and I was literally thrilled. There's a photo of me and like so elated that Darth Vader's at my bar mitzvah, and they played the music and all that stuff, and I was out of my mind, but never thought like, well, Darth Vader's 5 foot tall. I was just so thrilled, and I stopped growing. I'm 6'1". I stopped growing at 13 years old, so I was at 13. I was 6'1",
right?
And the rabbi used to call me in Yiddish the big one. I don't even remember what it was, but I was like towered over everybody. He was this 13-year-old, 6'1" big guy. Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, it was. I wish, like, if I had a Star Wars bar mitzvah today, it would be incredible,
Right.
But it was like my mom just could do with what she had, which wasn't much. Plus, there was, saving the money for that trip to go visit Rick Baker in London.
Kids today, I hate to say the words kids today because I definitely feel the gray hair coming out as I say that. But my son, his 5th birthday party, we had a local Jedi guild come and teach 12 5-year-olds how to use lightsabers, which, by the way, sounds like a great idea at the time until the Jedi leave and you have 12 5-year-olds with lightsabers running around your
smashing stuff. Yeah, that's a good idea, though. I might do that.
Yeah, no. Oh, it's amazing. Between them and the 501st, they are willing to do. All they ask for is a donation for whatever they are.
Cool. Listen, I mean, I don't know anybody. I really don't know anybody who said, I don't really like Star Wars. I don't never. And if they did, I don't. They're not my friends. So I would excommunicate anybody who said, Star Wars is lame. Like, that's it. You're clipped. Never talk. You've been shunned.
Yeah, deleted.
Yeah, this was our canceling. This is old school canceling.
Yeah, old school canceling. Well, it's true. When I'm on movies and I have some producer, telling me what they think, and I kid you not, I go, hey, when you saw Star Wars, where did you first see Star Wars? Like, oh, well, I wasn't born when it came out, so I saw it on TV or DVD. And I'm like, okay, we're done with the conversation. I don't listen to anybody that wasn't alive when Star Wars came out and saw it in the movie theater. Doesn't exist.
That's the first stamp on the Star Wars card. I guess.
It truly is. Yeah. I mean, what's cool is there's actually coming up because we have the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures opened up last year in September here in LA. And so they're screening the original Star Wars 70 millimeter print.
Oh, wow.
Been locked up at Disney for ever since George Lucas destroyed all the original ones. And they're screening it on May 31st and it's a 70 millimeter print.
Wow.
It's sold out, and of course, I went online and bought as many tickets as I could.
Yeah.
Marshall's like, I wonder if I can get a plane ticket. And
Is it as in pre-special edition?
Yeah, my brother, who's the senior projectionist there, found the print, and they had to negotiate with Disney because Disney's like, this is not the version that Lucas wants, and it's like, well, it's the version everybody wants to see.
It's history. Yeah, nothing else. It's history.
God bless that man. God bless that
it was
man.
before all the what have you ended up in it, and so anyhow, they're having the screening of it, and I mean, it sold out in 5 minutes. So, and that's a 1,000 seat theater. So, but
I swear, if they released the original theatrical version of Star Wars in cinemas now, it would do better than anything else.
I agree.
Anything else.
I agree. I know. And remember they did. Well, it wasn't the original, but they re-released all those, and they were doing great.
And when they did the special edition,
there was no skin off anybody's nose. It's like all you do is put them in the theater, and literally, I mean, I went to go see them over and over again. I can't watch
the only time I went to a movie theater during pandemic was when they did this Empire Strikes Back 40th anniversary release, and it's just because I wanted to see it on the big screen again, and I masked up, sat my own row, and just was like kind of a little paranoid, but I had to see it on the big screen again. You had to see it again.
Oh yeah, it's the way to do it. It's funny. I'm friends with Brannon Braga, who's a writer, director, and wrote a lot of Star Trek and stuff. And Brannon, we were talking about going to the movies, because for a while we were going to the movies together, and he buys all the seats around him so that there's no one near him. This is pre-pandemic. I can only imagine what he does now. But Brannon's like, oh no, I buy the two on the front, back, and side, so I'm completely in a circle of nobody. And I'm like, that's a good idea. So every time we went to see a movie, he's like, he'd buy out the whole area so no one was near us, and
that's
we couldn't
fantastic.
Talk or eat. It was about watching the movie, because we went and saw 2001.
Oh wow.
Like, oh yeah, I'm buying this whole section. It'll just be you and me.
I've never seen 2001 in the theaters. That's something I need to do. I know that's for sure.
70 millimeter print, absolutely spectacular. So
that's amazing. So you do a Darth Vader impression, I hear. So I gotta hear that.
Oh, see, I can't do it on cue.
Marshall said you can, and Marshall's
full of baloney.
I can't do a Darth Vader impression, but I can do it the way that
you can do the Dave Prowse version.
Dave
right?
Prowse.
The Dave Prowse version, right?
I can do Luke. I am your father. Now let's have a glass of cider and get on our combine harvester.
Well, I mean, it's iconic, I mean, James Earl Jones, and what a brilliant. There's another brilliant, stroke of casting. It's like, who better than James Earl Jones to, voice Darth Vader or whatever. But yeah, no, it's I love it. So it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, like Marshall had said, in our book, we talk about Star Wars. We have a new Star Wars story we never heard of from Christopher Tucker, and we had no idea. Christopher Tucker, who is a great legendary makeup artist, UK makeup artist, who did Elephant Man and Company of Wolves. We had no idea he worked on Star Wars, and it just happened to reveal, like in a phone conversation with Marshall, like, when I was helping design Chewbacca, and we're like, whoa, hold on. Marshall's like, wait a second, turns on the tape recorder,
Yeah, and then he's quite old, and he was eccentric when he was a young man, and he's gotten more so. Everybody who ever meet him or talks about him like he's he's an actual wizard. And I mean, he's the guy who he would have had they had the Oscar for best makeup the year before American Werewolf. There's no doubt he would have won it for the Elephant Man. And actually, them not giving him an Oscar for best makeup was one of the reasons that they actually brought in the category, right, Howard? I mean, that's kind of so. But he hadn't talked about Star Wars for a long time, and he gave us a bit, but then we got friendly, and I had several other conversations with him, and I would coax him, and I would say, so about the time you were working on Star Wars, and then he would remember something else, and I like we had like 5 conversations, and he would say to me, he said, I hope you're recording all this. I hope you're catching all these pearls. And it's like, yes, I am. I swear. Okay. And so over like 5 conversations, I got him to reveal everything that he could remember about Star Wars. And it's just, It's amazing. He worked on the Cantina sequence. So because Chewbacca was first introduced in the Cantina sequence, he had a hand in designing that. And he has hilarious memories of working with George Lucas, and some heartbreaking memories about getting rid of the stuff at the end. But I don't want to give it all away because it's in the book, and it's some of my favorite stuff that's in the book.
It's pretty cool. It was a very big surprise. Like, it just happened to pop, and we're like, wait a minute, you were involved with building Chewbacca with Stuart Freeborn, and he's like, oh yeah, we did this and this. And well, what other things? Like, oh, all this, and then we found a photo, a crew photo, and there's Chris Tucker standing there.
So hard to find anything because they didn't have people taking photographs. They didn't think that they were doing anything special. As he says that, you know, they all just thought it was all a bit silly. Certainly he did while he was working on it. And he's talking about saying, what characters did you design? And he's like, well, you know, there was the guy with the things on his face, and it was like, oh, bum face. I said, bum face. And then I remember, no, actually, that's called Ponda Baba, but we all called him bum face in school because it looks like he's got a little bum coming out of his face. And it was like, he just didn't know any of this. It's like after Star Wars happened, he just completely checked out. Although recently he was telling me that he had stalkers, Star Wars stalkers.
I'm sure.
He said someone sent him a bottle of wine once and was standing outside his house, and I mean, real freakazoids. But it's like, I thought, you know,
that was me actually. That was me.
I know. And you think that I'm somehow less of a stalker than this guy, you know.
That's pretty funny. That's great. Well, before I let you go, I got to ask, because it is a book called Masters of Makeup Effects, A Century of Practical Magic. I'll start with you, Marshall. Who's your favorite movie monster of all time?
Well, I suppose it's not really a makeup, but it would have to be King Kong. I just love King Kong. I also, because like all the great monsters, you feel some sort of sympathy for him. You know, he didn't ask to be knocked out and dragged off to America. It was like, you know, when he's like stomping around New York, it's like, take that, New York. It's like, you know, he didn't ask for that. And then he climbs up a building and they kill him. And it's like, for God's sake, that is really, really bad way to treat a visitor to your country, you know. So I would have to say King Kong and the Id monster from Forbidden Planet. And Jaws. And not so much because, I mean, Jaws, if you look at it, it doesn't look like maybe the most realistic creature ever in movies, but because it's so beautifully directed and well put together and played and everything about it, then that it just made that creature iconic, that monster sort of iconic. And I suppose from modern times, maybe the Rancor. And my favorite episode of the Book of Boba Fett was the one when he got the pet Rancor, and I was so disappointed that they didn't have like more stuff in that show with him training it. Obviously they wanted to save it for the big reveal at the end, but you know, it's obviously sort of a puppet, and that bit of slime that keeps hanging off its jaws when you're watching it, and but you know, I do love the Rancor.
Well, you see now, Marshall,
King Kong.
You would have been proud of my 9-year-old son then. We were watching, or maybe you'd be proud of my dad for making sure my son has watched these things. When we were watching Book of Boba Fett and the Rancor is climbing up the tower, my son's like, that's King Kong. And I was like, awesome. I'm doing my job as a parent. It's working.
No, absolutely. That's why we're not going to have child services take your children away, Pete.
Thank goodness.
Because you're doing a good job.
I'm doing the best I can, Marshall. Howard, how about you? Who's your favorite? I know that's a tough question because you worked on so many.
Well, no, I mean, I have to say my favorite is Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love the creature. He's my all-time favorite monster. I love the original film, and I like Creature Walks Among Us as well. But I think it's a perfect suit. I think it looks... it's just beautiful looking. It's a beautiful character and creature, and and I love the Charles Laughton Hunchback of Notre Dame. I love that movie, and I think that makeup is flawless. But yeah, I mean, those are some big influences on me. There was a movie called The Man of a Thousand Faces, starring James Cagney, and it's a story about Lon Chaney. And though James Cagney is not the greatest choice to play Lon Chaney, had nothing to look like him, and all the makeups that they did are so off, but it's still a very magical movie, and I love it. So, but yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon still remains the same. If I always say that if I got a call and they're like, we're going to remake it, I would really push to not change the design. I would just remake that suit, and it doesn't need upgrades. It's magnificent. Watch the original film.
Yep.
And that suit is as great as anything that's ever been done. And I think there was one period where we were approached to do a remake, which luckily went away. And they were like, oh no, it's going to be CGI and have these tentacles come out. And I'm like, I'm not working on this movie.
Yeah.
I refuse to bastardize, my childhood.
I mean, you could say the Shape of Water creature was heavily influenced there, right?
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, that's Guillermo. Guillermo loves Creature from the Black Lagoon, and that was, his love letter to, what if the creature story continued, And it's beautiful. A guy named Mike Hill, who's in the book, helped design and build that, along with a great makeup effects company called Legacy, which it's the guys from Stan Winston Studios, and that used to be part of Stan's, and they did a magnificent job. It's a beautiful, beautiful character. And Doug Jones, who's in the book, plays the asset. So, it's 6 degrees of Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Everything comes back to that.
Everything comes back to Creature from the Black Lagoon.
And I think you're right. I think that, those two monsters are monsters that you feel for. You definitely, that that's what makes it a great movie. It's not just a slasher. Nobody cares about Jason's origin story until the 14th version of the movie. But I mean, that's what it's that emotional piece that comes with it. It's not just and I think that's the misnomer, right?
Monster,
right? It's not just a monster movie. It's not. If you go in with that, you're going to miss so much of it.
Well, I think we are the monsters.
Yeah,
we are the monsters.
Humans are the monsters, and
we're just the worst ones. The creature. He's swimming around the Black Lagoon. What's he doing? He's probably just eating fish and having a lovely time. And these scientists, these literally come in so that they can take him off, put him in a pickle jar and take him back to a museum. Those sons of bitches, I wanted them all dead. Yeah. I wanted their families dead. I wanted their houses burnt down.
But I mean, it's kind of like, it's true. Like, we all feel this way. Like, monsters, or these creatures, I don't want to call them monsters. These creatures are victims of circumstance. Like, they were living a fine life. Yeah. Be it Godzilla, be it Kong, be it Mighty Joe, be it, Creature from the Black Lagoon, be it Frankenstein, be it the Mummy. They're all creatures of or victims of circumstance, and the humans are, the culprits.
100%. Well, gentlemen, the book comes out September 6th in the U.S. and when in the U.K.
Just September the 1st.
Okay, I thought it was a couple days earlier. Yeah, it's called Masters of Makeup Effects: A Century of Practical Magic. The link is in the notes of the podcast. If you want to continue to get more of these stories, get that book, and it's beautiful. And it again, you don't have to be a makeup fan to like this book. If you're a movie fan, if you're a genre fan, the stories in there are fantastic. The pictures will bring you things you've never seen before about some of your favorite movies. So make sure to check that out.
And it's got a cool cover. See, look at that.
Cover is
got a cool cover.
Yeah, that's the cover of the book. So very nice. Russell, who was the designer on the book, created this and did a great job. So
did a great job.
It's makeups that are in the book. So there's that from Buffy.
Yep.
That Todd McIntosh did. There we go. This creature from Childhood's End that Paul Caddy did, and 2 K&B things, Jupiter's Legacy, and then a cool werewolf Norman Cabrera did. So it's all cool stuff. And there's not a book like this. There's never been a book like this. And the fact that we had such great access to everybody and their photos makes it super special. And that it's just a really fun book to read. So it's we hope everybody enjoys it.
We got David and Monsi who designed like all the labyrinth creatures, talking about the creation of the Pale Man, working with Guillermo del Toro on the creation of the Pale Man. We've got Doug Jones talking about what it was like, in those costumes. And so we have it from like every side. And I know you're trying to outro us off, and we're just still pitching.
Hey, no, you know what? Honestly, I could probably talk for 6 hours about this stuff. And
we'll do it again. We'll talk again once the book comes out. So
absolutely fantastic. So Marshall, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, well, I'm always on Twitter at Marshall Julius. And I'm, on Facebook at Vintage Geek Central. But Howard's Instagram account is the place to be, really.
And Howard, where can we find you there?
That's Hoops511. So
excellent.
Hoops 511. And I try to, it's not heroin to me, but I try to post as much interesting things as I can. And there's a couple posts of my dog Alfie, so who's very dear to me. So
all cleared by the studio's legal department to make sure you're allowed to post them.
Of course. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very careful about what I post. So
that's great.
So I lead by example. But thank you so much for having us. It was a really good way to start the day.
This was great, and I definitely will have you both back on. Maybe when we get closer to the book launch, that would be fantastic.
Great.
So
thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Before I let you go, let me get each one of you to say this is Marshall Julius or Howard Berger, whoever you are, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy. Marshall, go first.
This is Marshall Julius, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
It's very professional.
That was
Did
good.
I say that right?
Yeah, no, you did.
Yeah. This is
I
Howard.
felt at the last moment that I
always
thought
have
it was
to
a
talk.
galaxy.
Marshall never stops talking. Marshall, be quiet. No, I'm going to do the intro, and you hush for 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
There. All right. Yes. Look at something on the wall. Okay. This is Howard Berger, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. Let me hit the end broadcast.